Now, my Lord Chief Justice, whither away?
How doth the king?
Exceeding well. His cares are now all ended.
I hope not dead. He's walked the way of nature.
To our purposes, he lives no more.
Oh, it is nice you had called me with him. The service that I truly did his life has left me open to all interest.
Indeed. I think the young king loves you not.
I know he does not. I allow myself to welcome the condition of the time, which cannot look more hideously upon me than I have drawn it in my fancy. Oh, God, I fear all will be overturned.
Tomorrow, Cousin Warwick. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, Cousin. Like men that had forgot to speak.
We do remember, but our argument is all too heavy to admit much talk.
Well, peace be with him that hath made us heavy.
Peace be with us, lest we be heavier.
Oh, good my lord, you have lost a friend indeed.
Though no man be assured what grace to find, you stand in coldest expectation. I am sorry. And to otherwise.
Well, you must now speak, Sir John Falstaff, there, which swims against your stream of quality.
Sweet princess, what I did in honor, led by the impartial conduct of my soul.
Where are you, Sir John? Oh, give me your hand, Master Bardolph.
I'm glad to see your worship.
Oh, I thank thee with all my heart, kind Master Bardolph, and welcome, my tall fellow. Oh, come, Sir John.
I'll follow you, good Master Robert Shadow. Follow for 2 horses. I have him already tempering between my finger and my thumb, shortly will I seal the thing.
Sir John.
I come. Master Shadow, I come.
Goodbye, sir. You shall not away tonight, Sir Good. What, Davy, I say,
You must excuse me, Master Robert Shadow.
I will not excuse you. You shall not be excused. Excuses shall not be admitted. There is no excuse, sir. You shall not be excused. Why, Davy! Yes, sir. Davy. Let me see. William Cook, bid him come hither.
Sir John,
You shall not be excused.
Marry, sir, thus shall we sow thee headland with wheat?
Well, there's red meat, Davy, but for William Cook, are there no young pigeons?
Yes, sir. Now, here is the smith's note for shoeing and plough iron.
Well, let it be cast and paid. Sir John, you shall not be excused.
Now, sir, a new link to the bucket needs be added.
Some pigeons, Davy, a couple of short legged hens, a joint of mutton. Tell William Cook.
And a thin man of war stay all night, sir.
Okay, you use him well. You shall see my orchard, where, in an arbor, we will eat a last year's pippin of my own grafting and so forth. And then, to bed.
Oh God, you have here a goodly dwelling, rich.
Baron, beg us all, Sir John. Come. Oh, off with your boots.
About thy business, Davy.
I beseech you, sir, to countenance William Visor of Wancourt against Clement Parks of the Hill.
There is many complaints, Davy, against that visor. Oh, that visor is an errant knave, did I not?
No, I grant your worship, he is a knave, sir. Yet, God forbid, sir, that a knave should have such a
I will devise matter enough out of his shadow to keep Prince Harry in continual laughter. Oh, you should see him laugh. His face be like a wet cloak inlaid up.
Warren, and God save your majesty.
This new and gorgeous garment, Majesty, sits not so easy on me as you think. Brothers, you mix your sadness with some fear. This is the English, not the Turkish court. Yet weep that Harry's dead, and so will I. But Harry lives, that shall convert those tears by number into hours of happiness.
We hope no other from your majesty.
You all look strangely on me. And you most. You are, I think, assured I love you not.
I am assured if I be measured rightly, your majesty hath no just cause to hate me.
No? How might a prince of my great hopes forget so great indignities you laid upon me?
I then did use the person of your father. The image of his power lay then on me. Question your royal thoughts, make the case yours. Be now the father and propose a son. Hear your own dignities so profaned. See your most dreadful laws so loosely slighted. Behold yourself so by a son disdained, and then imagine me taking your part and in your power, soft silencing your son.
You're right, Justice. And you weigh this well. Therefore still bear the balance and the sword.
The tide of blood in me hath proudly flowed in vanity till now. Now doth it turn and ebb back to the sea, where it shall mingle with the state of floods and flow henceforth in formal majesty. Now call we our High Court of Parliament.
And welcome, this long time. Be merry, be merry. Well said, Master Cyrus. And we shall be merry.
I don't think Master Silence has been a man of this mettle.
I have been merry twice and once.
Now comes in the sweet of the night.
Honor and long life to you, Master Silence.
Fill the cup and let it come.
I'll drink to Master Bardo and to all the cavalieros about London. I hope to see London once ever done.
And I might see you there, David.
By the mass, you'll crack a quart together, will you not? Master Bardolph, the knave will stick by thee, I can assure thee of that.
I'll stick by him, Master Shallow.
Why? There spoke a king. See who's that door there? Oh,
Aye, now you've done me right.
oh, gloomy night and dark be night. Flamingo is all right.
Please, your worship, there's one headstone at the court of news.
Oh,
This way. Sweet knight, thou art now one of the greatest men in this realm, Sir John. I am thy pistol and thy friend, and helter-skelter have I rode to thee, and tidings do I bring, and lucky joys, and golden times, and happy news of price.
I bet it I live like a man of this world.
Fruits for the world and worldlings base. I speak of Africa and golden joys.
give me pardon, sir, if, sir, you come with news from the court. I take it there's but two ways, either to utter them or to conceal them. I am, sir, under the king himself.
Oh, that. And the which king, Bezonian, speak or die?
And the king Harry.
Harry the Fourth or Fifth?
Harry the Fourth.
A foot for thine office, Sir John. Thy tender lambkin now is king. Harry the Fifth's the man. I speak the truth. When pistol lies, do this and think me like the bragging Spaniard.
Is the old king dead?
As nail in door. The things I speak are just.
Away, Barrow, saddle my horse. Master Moncharo, choose what office thou wilt in the land. Design pistol. I will double charge thee with dignities. Carry Master Silence to bed. Master Shallow, my lord, Shallow be what thou wilt. I am Fortune's steward. To cover my boots, will ride all night. Come, pistol, at your martyrdom, we will devise something to do thyself good. Boot, Master Shallow. I know the young king is still for me. Let us take any man's horses. The laws of England are at my commandment. Blessed are they, but it be my friends, and woe to my Lord Chief Justice. If I'd had time to have made me liveries, I would have bestowed £1,000. I borrowed of you, but it's no matter. This poor shirt is better. This shows my earnest perfection.
It does, sir.
My devotion, as it were, to ride day and night, and not to deliberate, not to remember, not to have patience to ship me.
It does.
To stand, stayed with travelling, sweating with desire to see him. And roared the city and trumpet clang the sails. God save thy grace. King Hal, my royal Hal.
The heavens be guard and king most royally provided.
God save thee, my sweet boy.
My Lord Chief Justice, speak to that vain man.
You know which, know you what 'tis to speak.
My king, my Jove, I speak to thee, my heart.
I know thee not, old man. Fall to thy prayers. How ill white hairs become a fool and jester. I've long dreamed of such a kind of man. So surfeit swelled, so old and so profane. But being awaked, I do despise my dream. Make less thy body hence and more thy grace. Leave gormandizing. Know the grave doth gape for thee thrice wider than for other men. Reply not to me with a full-born jest. Presume not that I am the thing I was.
For God doth know, so shall the world perceive, that I have turned away my former self. So will I those that kept me company. When thou dost hear I am as I have been, approach me and thou shalt be as thou wast, the tutor and the feeder of my riots. Till then I banish thee, on pain of death, as I have done the rest of my misleaders, not to come near our person by 10 mile.
The competence of life I will allow you, but lack of means enforce you not to evil. And as we hear you do reform yourselves, we will, according to your strengths and qualities, give you advancement. Be it your charge, my lord, to see performed the tenor of our word.
Set off.
Master Shadow, I owe you 1,000 pounds.
Yea, no, Sir John, which I beseech you to let me have home with me.
That could hardly be. Master Shadow, do not you grieve at this. I shall be sent for in private to him. Look, we must seem thus to the world. Fear not your advancements. I will be the man yet that shall make you great.
Oh, I cannot well conceive how, unless you should give me all Dublin to stuff me out with straw. I beseech you, good Sir John, let me have 500 of my roses.
I will be as good as my word. This is what you heard but a colour.
A colour that I fear you will die in, Sir John.
You know colours. Go with me to dinner. Come. There's an epistle. Come. Barrow. Come, Peter. I shall be sent for soon at night.
Go carry Sir John Falstaff from prison. Take all his company along with him.
Die, dog! Die, dog! Shall we have him stationed?
My lord!
I cannot now speak. I will hear you soon. Take them away.
Tell me what that trumpet crumble! Oh, the Lord Sir John will come!
Okay, watch your eyes. Bring them up slowly.
Did you notice a significant passage left out in 5:2? when the Chief Justice addresses Hal and essentially upbraids him for his prior behavior. And the king replies, "You are right, Justice." Now, they did include that. "And you weigh this well, therefore still bear the balance and the sword." In the version we just saw, it essentially stops there. But in Shakespeare's play, the king goes on quite a bit and essentially tells the Chief Justice, "You shall be as father to me." His own father, remember, just frequently died. And what you see in the play is this tension between Hal's two fathers, King Henry IV and Falstaff. Okay? He now acknowledges at this passage that the Chief Justice is going to take the place of King Henry IV. So what's going to happen to Falstaff? He's going to be disowned. He's finally going to push him away. Which goes back to that first soliloquy we saw of Prince Hal. When he says, my reformation, my sudden reformation shall so overshadow my previous life that it'll be like the sun coming out from behind the clouds. Okay? And he essentially says all those who stood by with him during his previous life will be cast aside. Now, the film version you just saw the end of, they seem to want to really tug at our heartstrings to make us feel sorry for Falstaff. Should we, though? Within the context of the play as Shakespeare wrote it, do Shakespeare's sympathies lie with Falstaff? No. Why not?
Well, even in that, throughout the rest of the play, he uses Hal, talks bad about Hal. He's two-faced, and he doesn't really care.
Who uses who more? Does Prince Hal use Falstaff more, or does Falstaff use him more? What is Falstaff's reaction when he finds out Hal is now Henry V? Okay.
He kind of feels like what a lot of parents of children who are movie stars, they get to leave that line. So
He says, "I will be preferred." He tells Master Shallow, Justice Shallow, that he will be one of the great men of the kingdom. Okay. Falstaff now thinks he is essentially going to have all the perks and joys of kingship, essentially, without all of the headaches. And that's why his last words as they're making their way to London are, let the Chief Justice beware. Because the Chief Justice has been hounding him, etc. Notice how the tables get turned. Okay? Now, leave all that aside. Even though there is an epilogue, I don't want to discuss the epilogue. And go to Henry V. Okay? The final play in this sequence, and it begins with a prologue, which I am going to show in a moment, where the chorus puts our minds in the proper setting, tells us what to imagine we are about to see. Okay? And then look at Act 1, Scene 1, where we hear the Archbishop of Canterbury talking with the Bishop of Ely. And Canterbury says to Ely, "The king is full of grace and fair regard, and a true lover of the Holy Church. The courses of his youth promised it not." Notice the audience is being reminded the king is not what he used to be like. The breath no sooner left his father's body, but that his wildness mortified in him. In whom? In the current king? Yes. In the former king? Yes. Seemed to die too. Really? When was it that the wildness in Prince Hal really died? Is it only after Henry IV died?
No, it was a little bit earlier
Or-
while he was kind of checking out the possibility of being king.
Doesn't it really begin back in the battle at Shrewsbury? When he when he kills Hotspur, and he says, all the honors, all the glories, all the fame you have earned will fall on my head. Okay? Yea, at that very moment, consideration. What does he mean by that? Consideration.
Admiration.
What does it mean to consider?
Think about.
To think about. So consideration is the noun form. Judiciousness. Forethought. He is saying. Did what? Like an angel came and whipped the offending Adam out of him. Consideration came, essentially, and made the old man die so that he would be replaced with the new man, the new Adam, leaving his body as a paradise to envelop and contain celestial spirits. Remember the other day I did on the board, the great chain of being, and you have the angelic above, humanity, and the beasts? He's saying Hal, who used to be more like the beasts, is risen. He's ascended. Never was such a sudden scholar made. Never came reformation in a flood with such a heady currents, scouring faults, nor never hydra-headed willfulness. Why is willfulness hydra-headed? What is a hydra? It's a mythical beast. You cut off one head and three grow in its place. Okay? So how can willfulness be hydra-headed? Exactly. Willfulness is putting self above everything else. So whatever issue arises, whatever need arises, always thinking of self first. Nor never hydra-headed willfulness so soon did lose his seat, and all at once, as in this king. Talk about that sudden reformation. Okay? And then Canterbury goes on and talks about Hal's reasoning and discoursing abilities. If you read the introduction talks at great length about how Henry V is largely about rhetoric, about the marshaling of arguments. Okay? And how Henry V uses arguments in different settings and different situations to advance his causes. Okay? So, let me go to, and like I said, I'm going to go back to the beginning of the prologue. I'm doing the prologue from the Kenneth Branagh 1989 version, and then I'm going to show you a comparison of the opening, almost the entire Act 1, if there's time, in the Branagh 1989 version versus the Tom Hiddleston version.
Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. A kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling sea. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. But pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that have dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or maybe cram within this wooden O the very casks that did fight the air at Agincourt? Oh, pardon. And let us, ciphers to this great account, on your imaginary forces work. What is your thoughts, that now let's deck our kings, carry them here and there, jumping o'er time, turning the accomplishment of many years into an hourglass. On the which supply, admit me chorus to this history. Who, prologue-like, your humble patience pray, gently to hear, kindly to judge our play.
My lord, I'll tell you. That self-bill is urged, which in the 11th year of the last king's reign is like to have passed against us. But how, my lord, shall we resist it now? It must be thought of. If it pass against us, we lose the better half of our possession. But what prevention? The king is full of grace and fair regard, and a true love of the Holy Church. The causes of his youth promised it not. Since his addiction is to courses vain, his hours filled up with riots, banquets, sports, and never noted in him any study. But, my good lord, how now for mitigation of this bill urged by the Commons doth his Majesty incline to it or no? He seems indifferent, or rather swaying more upon our part, for I have made an offer to his Majesty as touching France.
Okay, stop there for a moment. What are they talking about?
Being dispossessed of their property.
This bill they're talking about is a bill in Parliament to tax the church heavily, to essentially take away half the property. Okay? So the Archbishop of Canterbury is saying he talked with the king about financing a war in France if the king essentially kills the bill. So what is motivating the Archbishop of Canterbury?
Material self-interest.
Yeah, greed. Okay?
Where is my gracious Lord of Canterbury? God and his angels guard your sacred throne and make you long become it.
Sure, we thank you. My learned Lord, we pray you to proceed and justly and religiously unfold why the law Salic that they have in France, or should not bar us in our claim. And pray take heed how you impawn our person, how you awake our sleeping sword of war. We charge you in the name of God, take heed. For never two such kingdoms did contend without much fall of blood.
Then hear me, gracious sovereign. There is no bar to make against your highness' claim to France, but this, which they produce from Pharamond. In terram salicam mulieris ne succedent, no woman shall succeed in Salic land. Which Salic land the French unjustly glows to be the realm of France. Yet their own author faithfully affirms that the land Salic lies in Germany, between the floods of Saar and the Elbe. Then doth it well appear this Salic law was not devised for the realm of France, nor did the French possess the Salic land until 421 years after defunction of King Pharamond, I suppose the founder of this law. King Pepin, which deposed Childeric, did as heir general, being descended of Blifil, which was the daughter to King Clothair, may claim the title to the crown of France. Hugh Capet also, who usurped the crown of Charles the Duke of Lorraine, sole heir male of the true line and stock of Charles the Great, could not keep quiet in his conscience, wearing the crown of France to satisfy the fair Queen Isabel, his grandmother, was lineal of the Lady Ermengar, daughter to Charles, the aforesaid Duke of Lorraine, by the which marriage the line of Charles the Great was reunited to the crown of France. So that as clear as is the summer sun, all appear to hold in right and title of the female. So do the kings of France unto this day. Howbeit, they would hold up this Salic law to bar your highness claiming from the female.
May I, with right and conscience, make this claim?
Let me pause for a moment. Okay. Context of all that is Henry is claiming, okay, right to the throne of France through a female on his side. The French are claiming you cannot claim right to the throne through the mother's line, even though historically you get this list of kings who claimed it exactly that way. So the archbishop is making the argument that they can't have it both ways. They can't say that you can only get it through the male line, even though many of their kings in the past got it through the female line. Okay?
The sin upon my head, dread sovereign. Stand for your own and wave your bloody flag.
Your brother kings and monarchs of the earth do all expect that you should rouse yourself, as did the former lions of your blood.
Never king of England had nobles richer, more loyal subjects whose hearts have left their bodies here in England and lie pavilioned in the fields of France. We'll let their bodies follow, my dear liege, with blood and sword and fire to win your right. In aid thereof, we of the spirituality will raise your highness such a mighty sum as never did the clergy at one time bring into any of their ancestors. Calling the messengers sent from the Dauphin.
Okay, and we're going to stop there for a moment because that's where that little section ends. And then we're going to go back to the archbishop and bishop.
My good lord, how now for mitigation of this bill urged by the Commons?
It must be thought on. If it pass against us, we lose the better half of our possession. For all the temporal lands which men devout have given to the church would they strip from us. And to the coffers of the king besides, £1,000 by the year. Thus runs the bill.
This would drink deep.
To drink the cup and all.
Doth his majesty incline to it or no?
He seems indifferent, or rather swaying more upon our part. For I have made an offer to His Majesty upon our spiritual convocation as touching France. To give a greater sum than ever at one time the clergy yet did to his predecessors part withal.
Having this offer seen received.
A good acceptance of His Majesty. Save that there was not time enough to hear.
What was the impediment?
The French ambassador upon that instant craved audience. And the time, I think, is come to give him hearing. Is it 4 o'clock?
It is.
Then go we in to hear his eminence.
I'll wait upon you, and I long to hear it.
Move the cursor.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, let me make that.
Where is my gracious Lord of Canterbury?
Here.
Bring him forward, good uncle.
Shall we call in the French ambassador, my liege?
Not yet. We would be resolved before we hear him of some things of weight that task our thoughts concerning us and France.
God and His angels guard your sacred throne and make you long become it.
Sure. We thank you. My learned Lord, we pray you to proceed, and justly and religiously unfold, if I may now with conscience make this claim. And God forbid, my dear and faithful Lord, that you should fashion rest or buoy or reading or nicely charge your understanding soul with opening titles miscreant. For God doth know how many now in health shall drop their blood in approbation of what your reverence shall incite us to. Therefore take heed how you impawn our person, how you awake our sleeping sword of war. We charge you in the name of God, take heed. For never two such kingdoms did contend without much fall of blood, whose guiltless drops are every one a woe. Under this conjuration speak, my lord, for we will hear, note, and believe in heart. What you speak is in your conscience washed as pure as sin with baptism.
Then hear me, gracious sovereign, and you peers, that are yourselves, your lives, and services to this imperial throne. There is no bar to make against your highness' claim to France. Gracious Lord, stand for your own. Unwind your bloody flag. Look back into your mighty ancestors. Go, my dread lord, to your great-grandsire's tomb. Invoke his warlike spirit. And your great-uncle's, Edward, the Black Prince, who on the French ground played a tragedy making defeat on the full power of France. Awake remembrance of these valiant dead, and with your puissant arm renew their feats. You are their heir. You sit upon their throne. The blood and courage that renowned them runs in your veins, and my thrice puissant liege is in the very main morn of his youth, ripe for exploits and mighty enterprises.
Your brother kings and monarchs of the earth do all expect that you should rouse yourself, as did the former lions of your blood.
They know your grace have cause, and means, and might. So doth your highness. Never, King of England, have nobles richer, and more loyal subjects, whose hearts have left their bodies here in England, and lie pavilioned in the fields of France.
Let their bodies follow my blood and sword and fire to win your right. Therefore to France, my liege.
Call in the messenger sent from the Dauphin. Now are we well resolved, and by God's help and yours, the noble sinews of our power, France being ours, we'll bend it to our oar or break it all to pieces.
Okay, we're gonna pause there and go back.
Now are we well resolved, and by God's help and yours, the noble sinews of our power, France being ours, we'll bend it to our oar.
Notice in that staging, surrounded by the
break it all to pieces.
knights of the church, so to speak.
Now are we well prepared to know the pleasure of our fair cousin Dauphin.
Your Highness, lately sending into France, did claim some certain dukedoms in the right of your great predecessor, King Edward III. In answer of which claim, the prince, my master, says that you savour too much of your youth. He therefore sends you, meeter for your spirit, this ton of treasure. And in lieu of this, desires you let those dukedoms that you claim hear no more of you. This, the Dauphin speaks.
What treasure, uncle?
Tennis balls, my liege.
We are glad the Dauphin is so pleasant with us. His present and your pains we thank you for. When we have matched our rackets to these balls, we will in France, by God's grace, play a set. Shall strike his father's crown into the hazard, and we understand him well. How he comes o'er us with our wilder days, not measuring what use we made of them. But tell the Dauphin, I will keep my state, be like a king, and show my sail of greatness when I do rouse me in my throne of France. And tell the pleasant prince, this mock of his have turned his balls to gunstones, and his soul shall stand sore charged for the wasteful vengeance that shall fly with them. For many a thousand widows shall this his mocked out of their dear husbands, mock mothers from their sons, mock castles down, and some are yet ungotten and unborn that shall have cause to curse the Dauphin's scorn. So get you hence in peace, and tell the Dauphin his jest will savour but of shallow wit, when thousands weep more than did laugh at it. Convey them with safe conduct.
Okay. Here.
Now are we well prepared to know the pleasure of our fair cousin Dauphin? For we hear your greeting is from him, not from the king.
May it please your majesty to give us leave freely to render what we have in charge? Or shall we sparingly show you the Dauphin's meaning?
We are no tyrant, but a Christian king. Therefore, with frank and with uncurbed plainness, tell us the Dauphin's mind.
Thus then, in few. Your Highness lately sending into France, did claim some certain dukedoms in the right of your great predecessor, King Edward III. In answer of which claim, the prince, our master, says that you savor too much of your youth and bids you be advised. There is no in France that can be with a nimble galleon one. You cannot revel into dukedoms there. He therefore sends you, meter for your spirit, this ton of treasure. And in lieu of this, desires you let the dukedoms that you claim hear no more of you. This, the Dauphin speaks.
What treasure, uncle?
Yes, well,
We are glad the Dauphin is so pleasant with us. His present and your pains we thank you for. When we have matched our rackets to these balls, we will, in France, by God's grace, play a set shall strike his father's crown into the hazard. Tell him he hath made a match with such a wrangler that all the courts of France shall be disturbed with chases. And we understand him well. How he comes o'er us with our wilder days, not measuring what use we made of them. We never valued this poor seat of England, and therefore living hence did give ourselves to barbarous license, as 'tis ever common that men are merriest when they are from home. But tell the Dauphin, I will keep my state, be like a king, and show my sail of greatness when I do rouse me in my throne of France, and I will rise there, with so full a glory that I will dazzle all the eyes of France, yea, strike the Dauphin blind to look on us. And tell the pleasant prince, this mock of his hath turned his balls to gunstones, and his soul shall stand sore charged for the wasteful vengeance that shall fly with them. For many a thousand widows shall this his mock out of their dear husbands, mock mothers from their sons, mock castles down, and some are yet ungotten and unborn that shall have cause to curse the Dauphin's scorn. This lies all within the will of God, to whom I do appeal, and in whose name tell you the Dauphin I am coming on, to venge me as I may, and to put forth my rightful hand in a well-hallowed cause. So, get you hence in peace, and tell the Dauphin his jest will save a butt of shallow wit, when thousands weep more than did laugh at it. Obey him with safe conduct.
Okay. Watch your eyes. I'll bring them up slowly. Now back up a bit. We've seen the discussion between the king and the archbishop. And the archbishop goes on, gives him all kinds of legal reasons why it's okay to invade France. And line 94, 95, line 96. The king asks directly, may I with right and conscience make this claim? That is, legal right, but why conscience?
Well, he has one. A lot of people, if he makes this claim, a lot of people are going to die.
Exactly. He wants to know, will he be justified in God's eyes? That's what he means by conscience. Can I, with a clear conscience, should I die, okay, can I make this claim? The sin upon my head. Now, normally you would take that to mean that the archbishop is saying, well, of course, because he wouldn't want to be claiming the sins of the king and all the people who go to war on his head, but he seems to be saying that. Stand for your own, that is, your own territory in France. Unwind your bloody flag. Look back into your mighty ancestors, and then he goes on and names them, etc. Okay? So he then hears advice from Westmoreland and Exeter saying, everybody's expecting you, you need to stand up for yourself. Well, why are they all encouraging him in this? Well, it does benefit them too a little bit. Why else? You got to go back to Henry IV, Part 2. What were Henry IV's last words to his son? Busy the giddy minds. That is, busy the minds of those at court with what? Foreign expedition. And he mentioned France specifically. In other words, he is telling his son, in order for you to truly be king, what must you do? You have to go to war. You have to lead troops into battle. Okay? Plus, that will help diffuse, let's say, some of the tensions in the kingdom of the time. Keep in mind, there wasn't open rebellion because only 2 or 3 lords had disagreements with the king. There was open rebellion because a lot of the kingdom didn't like some of the things that Henry IV had done. So, going to war against a oft warring neighbor, France, was a good way to unite English nationalism behind the current king. So, go on to the king calling the messengers in. And he says there, about line 222, now we are resolved, and by God's help and yours, the noble sinews of our power, France being ours, will bend it to our awe. We will make France look on us with awful eyes, or break it all to pieces. France is going to become an example for all the rest of the world, or at least the rest of the Western world. France will look on us as the royal we, the king, with awe, or I'll destroy it. Now, notice the martial aspect here. Or there will sit ruling in large and ample empire over France and all her almost kingly dukedoms, or lay these bones in an unworthy urn, tombless with no remembrance over them. When he says or there, he means either we'll sit and rule over France, or we'll get buried in some unknown tomb, because we'll be slaughtered. So, he calls in the messenger. And the ambassador says, do you want to hear what the Dauphin really says, or do you want me to kind of gloss it over and make it sound nice? He goes, no, I'm a Christian king. Go right ahead. And so we get the Dauphin say through the ambassador, the prince, I'm skipping the first few lines. The prince, our master, says that you savor too much of your youth. What does that mean, to savor too much of your youth?
I think he's saying you're a thief now like you were when you were a kid.
Okay, it's possible. What do you do when you savor something?
It's like you're enjoying. It's like he didn't set aside his childish sayings to pick up the throne.
Okay.
So enjoying his.
Exactly.
Smile.
He is like savoring a fine wine. You swish it around in your mouth and you hold. He says, you are too enjoying of your youth. Now keep in mind, when he talks about his youth, is he talking about the king as he is now? No. You think the world is your plaything, like you did prior to becoming king. And bid you be advised, there's not in France that can be with the nimble galliard one. Look at your gloss. A galliard, a lively dance. The Dauphin has heard about Hal's riotous youth. Okay? You cannot revel into dukedoms there. You're not going to win France by going over with a bottle of sack, some whores, and old fat John Falstaff. That's what he's saying. He therefore sends you meter for your spirit. Meter, more fitting for your spirit. What? A chest of tennis balls. Go away, little boy. Play with some balls. Play games. This isn't for you. Okay? We are glad. Now, before we talk about this response of the king, which of the two versions that you just saw do you think was more effective? The Kenneth Branagh or the Tom Hiddleston? Why? Okay. How was he more powerful? What was the different approach that Kenneth Branagh took to Tom Hiddleston's?
Well, it's like he stayed on the throne.
Okay.
And glared at him from being higher than him.
Okay.
He stayed on his level.
Exactly. I mean, he stayed on the throne, which is on a raised dais, so he's looking down on him. You said he glared.
Mm-hmm.
How did he speak?
Very even.
Even,
Yeah.
precise, and curt. Quietly. So what happens when you speak very quietly? The others must lean forward. They must really put their powers of attention forth. Whereas Tom Hiddleston's getting up, walking around, you know.
I kind of like Hiddleston's better because instead of like immediately reacting, he plays with them a little bit. He pretends to consider this as if it were an actual serious proposition, which to me strikes me as way scarier than I am the gruff king and I will continue to be gruff. Like, let's see here. No.
Why does Kenneth Branagh do it that way?
I think in some ways it's maybe making the investor think that he's still a little bit of the old Hal that they think he is in the beginning, because they're like, oh, well, here he is kind of taking this lighthearted as he has his entire life.
In the Kenneth Branagh or the Tom Hiddleston?
In the Hiddleston.
Yeah, exactly. The Branagh is showing what? A complete change. I am not. What did he tell Falstaff at the end of Henry IV, Part 2? He tells him, don't speak to me. I know thee not, page 871. Presume not that I am the thing I was. For God doth know, so shall the world perceive, I have turned away my former self. Okay? And Shakespeare's channeling all kinds of St. Paul's writings here. So when he puts away his former self, when I was a child, I spake and acted as a child. When I became an adult, I acted like an adult. That's what Howell's doing. He's almost showing the transformation in an individual from pre-Christian to Christian life. Okay? So you can do King Henry V different ways. One of the things I like about Hiddleston's is that you see in the course of the speech the change, the transformation. When he addresses him finally and says, I will rise there with so full of glory that I will dazzle all the eyes of France. Yea, strike the Dauphin blind to look on us. And then he goes on and talks about how the Dauphins mocking me shall what? Become a mockery of him. Go back to the beginning of the speech. We are glad the Dauphin is so pleasant with us. In other words, I take his joke. Very funny. His present and your pains, we thank you for. When we have matched our rackets to these balls, we will in France, by God's grace. Notice everything Hal says is by God's grace, God willing, etc. Play a set shall strike his father's crown into the hazard. Hazard in royal tennis, an opening in one of the high walls and closing the court, hitting the ball into such a hazard, score winning point. In other words, the Dauphin has just challenged the king. And he's saying, I'm going to return the serve. Tell him he'th made a match with such a wrangler. Wrangler, 264, adversary, disputant, that all the courts of France will be disturbed with chases. Notice the tennis metaphor throughout the speech. Returns of the ball, or chasing after the game, or chasing after the enemy. And we understand him well, how he comes over us with our wilder days. The Dauphin is addressing us, me, as if I'm still in my wilder days. Not measuring, what use we made of them. Now that's cold and calculating and conniving. He is telling his audience, that was the act. See, if you read the introduction will say at one point, page 874, second paragraph in the left-hand column, right about in the middle of the paragraph. However much we may be swayed emotionally by his rhetoric, or by the rhetoric, we realize that the public figure of Henry V is a mask behind which we can perceive little. Well, guess what? So is the private figure of Hal. Hal in the stews, Hal in the whorehouses is as much a mask as the public figure. The real question ought to be, who is the real Hal/Henry V? Kind of like, who is the real Hamlet when we get to Hamlet? Is Hamlet really mad? Is he really crazy? Or is he, as he tells Horatio, Bernardo, and Marcellus, is he merely putting on an antic disposition because he knows everybody is watching him? So the real heart of the play, it seems to me, and the real heart of so many of Shakespeare's plays, who is really the king or the monarch or the individual that is the protagonist of the play? All right? Not measuring what use we made of them. We never valued this poor seat of England. And therefore living hence where? Not here. Not at the court. Not in this seat. Therefore living hence did give ourselves to barbarous license. As 'tis ever common that men are merriest when they are from home. You get them outside the house, away from the proverbial ball and chain, and what will men do? They'll let rip. They'll have fun. Look what the men of England do, some of them at least, when we get into the fields of France. What's going to happen to Bardolph? He gets hung for thieving from the churches when it is against the law of the King of England to steal from the churches. Bardolph, one of the men he used to hang around with. Okay? But tell the Dauphin, I will keep my state. Be like a king. Okay? You can pronounce that be like, or be like a king. And show my sail of greatness when I do rouse me in my throne of France. For that I have laid by my majesty and plotted like a man for working days. But that, okay, or for that. In other words, he's saying, to show what I will be like, I have done these things, laid by my majesty and plotted like a man for working days. In other words, I behaved like a commoner. I will rise there with so full a glory that I will dazzle all the eyes of France. Yea, strike the Dauphin blind to look on us, and tell the pleasant prince this mock of his hath turned his balls to gunstones. There might be a pun there, by the way. He is talking about the tennis balls.
I can't see Shakespeare giving up.
If there's a pun, Shakespeare's, especially if it's a genital joke, Shakespeare's going to pun on it. Okay? And his soul shall stand sore charged for the wasteful vengeance that shall fly with them. He is saying the Dauphin will be responsible before God for the souls that die as a result of the gunstones, the cannonballs. He is the one, in other words, to have begun this war. For many a thousand widows shall this his mock out of their dear husbands. Mock mothers from their sons, mock castles down, and some are yet ungotten and unborn, that shall have cause to curse the Dauphin scorn. Children whose mothers are currently pregnant, who will be born to a world unlike that inhabited by their parents, because their fathers and brothers will be dead. This lies all within the will of God. In other words, God so ordains this, to whom I do appeal, and in whose name tell you the Dauphin, I am coming on. Almost like you can hear the hoofbeats coming. To avenge me as I may, and to put forth my rightful hand in a well-hallowed cause. Well-hallowed means this is sacred. God is on my side. So get you hence. Tell the Dauphin his jest will savor but of shallow wit, when thousands weep more than did laugh at it. Now, one of the things I like more about Kenneth Branagh's, do we see any laughing? That's the point of this part of the speech. Thousands more will weep than did laugh. Well, how many laughed? None. Okay? This was a merry message, Exeter says. We hope to make the cinder blush at it. So, he says, now we have no thought in us but France, save those to God that run before our business. Therefore, let our proportions for these wars be soon collected. That is, we have to start arming the men. Okay? And Act 1 finishes. We're going to stop there. We're going to pick up, we won't quite finish the play, but we'll get through most of it on Thursday, beginning with Act 2.